Hello YouTube, this is my cosplay breakdown for Aeon Flux. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I did to make the costume and maybe give you some tips in case you want to make anything similar. The first thing I made was the shirt, her jacket really in the series. Pretty simple build if you've ever made a jacket before. If you've never made any sort of shirt or jacket before, they can be a little difficult. I had a pattern base that I've used for all of my shirts and jackets that I used for this as well. So that part wasn't that bad, just had to do some futzing to get a nice high collar because it's almost like a mock turtleneck that she has, and a nice silver zipper down the front. I made the same mistake that I have made before, which it amazes me that I keep making the same mistake, which is to get the wrong kind of zipper. So I have a zipper that doesn't come undone on the bottom, so it can't actually be a jacket that goes all the way down. As far as the structural look of it, it's probably better that it didn't because it made me keep this base of my jacket all as one piece. So you can see I repurposed an old bra for the inside to give it some shape and support. Now, I can put the bra on with it clasped, but I can't take it off with it clasped. So in the back here, you can see it stays clasped, but then it kind of gets tucked in under here. So there's a full ring of fabric that the bra stays inside of, and I can put it on this way. And then when it's time to take it off, I can go in here, unclasp it, and then it gives me way more stretch, and then I can pull it off of myself because it's a pretty tight fit to get something that stays around your bust snugly but can still get over your shoulders, especially when your sleeves are gloves. In the show, it's clear that her jacket sleeve is supposed to extend all the way down to a set of gloves. Now, I've never made gloves before. It actually turned out to be pretty easy. So the fabric I used on all of this is a black jeggings fabric, which was a great decision. And so the gloves are pretty simple because you basically can just trace your hand, give yourself a little give, and then sew along the inside, and it works really well. I did do a test glove to make sure that I understood it before doing it here, and I highly recommend it just because there was some technique to it and understanding, you know, how far do I have to go down? How do I make sure that I don't end up with holes in the creases here? My friend who cosplays over at Random Tuesday gave me a brilliant idea, which was to put these little holes in here. I realize it's black fabric, so it's a little hard to see. So when I put it on, I've got the glove here. When it's all the way pulled down, it seems totally even and straight. But while the glove is on, I can tuck this out and get my hand out to the side, so then I can eat sticky foods, I can go to the bathroom, I can futzy with everything, and I don't have to have gloves on all of the time. And so I had these on both sides, on both my hands, and it was so brilliant and such a good idea, and I was so happy she suggested that to me. Moving on to the underwear part, I had an old pair of black underwear that had gotten some holes in it, and I was originally thinking I might repurpose it for the base of the underwear, and then I started to realize, you know, it's gonna be too thin, too flimsy, but it's a great way to build a pattern because I could put the underwear on and then just sort of draw on myself where the lines are of the actual piece of underwear that I want, and then I can cut this old piece of underwear that I don't need anymore, and I'll have a perfect shape that I can then use to pattern. This was not only a great idea for patterning, but then I also ended up with a pair of underwear that are perfectly sneaky the shape underneath what I made. So since I can't really wash the actual costume piece, I can wear these under it, so that way I have something that I can wash in between wears of the costume, which is really nice. This is the underwear piece itself. You can see the sort of front cod piece. I ended up putting some craft foam inside of it to give it this structure and definition and that crease down the front. There's this recurring visual theme in the original Aeon Flux where everyone has a cod piece, and I actually kind of like it because the male and female characters in the show tend to get sexualized in a fairly equal way. So it's a good example of how you can have a very sexually charged aesthetic without having it be completely about the objectification of your female characters, because the male characters are getting equally objectified in a way that is actually very uncomfortable because you're so not used to it, which is part of the reason I like Aeon Flux. For the most part, once I had my original template from the underwear, it really was just a matter of cutting the right shapes and getting it here. You know, with my D-loops, I didn't think until I was already done that these are supposed to actually be looped around, so I just doubled the fabric over it and sewed it in there, so it looks fine. For the back, I reinforced it with some craft foam and got some rivets for the front and back from Tandy Leather, my local rivet supplier. I made every part of this out of the jeggings fabric and just reinforced some of it with craft foam, but these straps that go to the holsters on the side are doubled over. I think it's like 4 layers of fabric to have a more belt-like feeling and to keep it from stretching too much. The little pockets she has, this is one. So I made the shape of it, but did reinforce like the sides with craft foam so that it would keep its shape, and then did a lot of reinforcing on this side where my gun goes. So that's her gun holster. I opted not to try to recreate her gun. Her gun is very cool and very weird, and also clearly not the shape of her holster. So if you have a gun, you kind of have to either change the gun or change the holster. So I already had a fake gun and opted to change the gun. One thing that was very important in creating this was keeping the weight distribution in mind. When you look at it and you've got the gun holsters and pockets, and it's a weird shape and a lot of it is very thin, you just have to really keep in mind, you know, how heavy is all of this is gonna be? Is it gonna stay up? And where's it gonna pull and tug? I ended up having to make some changes along the front because it would pull out funny. You know, use the fabric to establish more tension. I had to make sure that I had the lightest fake gun possible so that it wasn't pulling down on the sides too much. There's no one tip or trick for that. The key is to think about it as soon as you start making it. And as long as you keep it in your mind the whole time of how will I keep this from getting stretched out funny when it's being pulled from these top side and the side and the bottom all at once. You know, how will I keep the shape of this front nice and pointy at the top? You know, you need the craft foam to give yourself some support because fabric will just fall right over. But how do I also keep it from getting stretched too far? I actually need to make a little adjustment in the back and probably hook some of this fabric together, because when I was wearing it, it would stretch out too much and I'd lose this nice crease and bump that I'd worked so hard to get. So keep that in mind if you're making anything like this where you maybe don't have a lot of the structural support you have on a normal garment, but it's supposed to act as though you still do. And to tie the two together, I had to make a belt. When you look at it, you're like, I don't even know how that goes on you, but I promise it works. What I wanted to do was give myself a lot of options for adjustment. And so pretty much every part of this belt is a doubled over Velcro strap so that I can make it really long, I could make it pretty short, and it wouldn't matter. Because this is the shape of the belt when it's fully done. This part connects up and this in the back connects back to the underwear. And every single part of it is adjustable. And when I first put it on and was wearing it and it fit perfectly, because obviously I've been making it for my own body this whole time, I thought, Katrina, you really wasted your time making every single thing a Velcro adjustable strap. I was so happy midway through the night that I had done this, because I was at a party and so I was eating chips and drinking and everything like that. And over time, you know, your belly just expands a little, and I was able to take this whole thing and just like pull it down a little bit, because otherwise it was starting to creep up so that the belt was above my belly because my belly had gotten bigger. So I was very pleased with my past self for thinking that I might want to make this adjustable. This was also fabric that was doubled over several times. I think it's 4 layers of fabric that I used, and also reinforced by sort of stitching the whole thing. So it feels very belt-like and very secure, and it doesn't stretch that much, even though it's the same jeggings fabric that I needed the stretchiness for the glove aspect and the coat aspect to get those looking correct. For my boots, I went to Goodwill, picked up a pair of shoes that had the right heel that I liked. Not quite the right toe, but close enough. And just draped my jeggings over the top. Fortunately, this is a character who the front of her boots is actually supposed to be a little saggy and bunchy. So the fact that it's hard to get rid of that in a normal boot cover didn't matter. I could have bunchy fronts of my shoe, which also makes it very easy to get on and off. So I could have a solid seam up the whole back, didn't need any zippers or anything, even in the heel. And then just glued it directly onto the shoe. That's why I got Goodwill shoes, because I wanted to have this nice, clean, even seam. The nice thing about jeggings fabric is, because it's a knit, it's not going to unravel on the ends, so you don't have to hem it if you don't want to. So I left the tops unhemmed because I knew the boot is supposed to come halfway up her thighs, which is the worst place for a boot to end, because a boot wants to end either all the way up practically at your crotch or right above your knee, because the middle of your thigh is like the biggest part and it's not where it wants to sit. It wants to either fall down or get pulled all the way up. So I didn't put a hem because I didn't want to add any extra weight or weirdness, and I just kept it up using fashion tape and just putting a layer of fashion tape along the entirety of both my thighs. And the trick with fashion tape, if you don't know, is to flex your muscles when you're attaching it. So you flex your thigh so that when you're pushing it down, you get a really nice solid surface that you can really stick on and get that nice connection. And for the most part, they stayed up all night. I started to lose it a little bit on one of them. Fortunately, my fashion tape fits in my little pocket here, so I was able to have it just in case, but I didn't end up needing it. For her knee guards, I used craft foam, which most cosplayers do who do this costume. Totally makes sense. It's a good material. It's lightweight, it's cheap, it's easy to work with. It can get a little two-dimensional because it's just a flat piece of craft foam. So a couple of things I did to counteract that. One, I layered it, so there's a good 4 layers of craft foam to make this top part, 2 to make this bottom one. I also kept this outer ring and the center thing as 2 separate pieces so that they would have a little air in between them. I think that also gives it some nice depth. And then with these things on the side, they actually almost naturally have this bend to them because I had them coming straight out of the side but then connecting into a point. So just the action of pulling them like that bent them most of the way, and then you can just use heat. I even just used a hair dryer and a bowl to help shape it. Used spray paint to color it. The key to this, if you haven't done a lot of metal painting before, is completely coat it with either black or brown, depending on if it's a cool metal like silver versus a warm metal like probably a gold. So covered in black, and then spray paint it with silver, and don't get too hung up about getting every little inch of the silver there, because then what you end up with is these nice little pockets where there's a little bit of black showing through and it feels a little bit more like real metal. And these just slip on over my boots with the elastic, and they hold up great. And they look kind of weird and cool. I had a guy on the street ask me if these were what the insides of knee pads look like. They're like knee pad skeletons. As you may have noticed, I have my wig here in the back. This is the Virginia Classic from Arta Wigs, and it is a lace front wig, and this is my first lace front wig, and I am a believer. This was amazing. This was the most comfortable wig I've ever worn. So for those of you who don't know, a lace front wig has, you can barely even probably see it, but the front, rather than being tied to sort of an elastic and a wig cap, has lace on the front. And there's kind of a more of a wig cap style on the back and the base that keeps it all together. But it means that in the front, you have to secure it to your forehead somehow. You can't just put it on and throw in some bobby pins. And lace front wigs are extremely popular among Black women who like to wear wigs. And so there are lots of tutorials online from women who wear wigs like this every single day, who will give you all of their tips about how to get it looking good, make it easy, get it really secure. So their tips are for wigs that are probably even more secure than you're used to if you're only used to wearing wigs for cosplay, because these are wigs that they're going to wear out in their everyday lives all of the time. So I highly recommend. There's so many tutorials, lots of different options. I went with I didn't want the classic glue that they use, but there's this product called Got to Be Glued Ultra Glued Styling Gel, which is not glue, it is styling gel. And specifically the black bottle, not the yellow one. There's 2 different versions. But you can use this, and it really is as simple. You know, look at the tutorial because they give you all of the special details to keep it looking really wonderful. But it's basically, you know, clean off your forehead, put a layer of this, let it dry a little, put another layer, and then place your wig down and tack it down and let it dry. And I wore this wig all night without any other bobby pins. I had bobby pins to keep my hair up, and I had a wig cap to keep my hair in, but I didn't put any bobby pins on the top. The wig just stayed in place with just this front and the feeling of it, and it was so comfortable and worked perfectly, stayed super secure, never got out of line or anything. And then at the end of the night, you just kind of gently rub water on it to loosen up the styling gel, and you're good. And so that was amazing. So lace front wig, love it. I actually had to pull out some of the hair after I wore it because I didn't like how it looked. So you can kind of see almost an in progress, this is what I was doing. But I styled this using Elmer's glue, which is what I did on my last wig that had to be an unusual shape. And so this wig, the Virginia, was the perfect cut. I barely had to cut. I had to like snip a little bit off the edge, but otherwise I didn't have to cut the hair at all. It was already the perfect style because it was short in the back and then it got longer in the front, which is what I needed to recreate these little loops. And it really is just a matter of taking a little bit, getting some Elmer's glue, shaping it, leaving it to dry, getting a little bit more. The key is to do a little bit at a time. Part of the reason I undid this and I'm gonna redo it is because I tried to do too much at once, and it just doesn't look good when you try to do too much at once. It gets balled up weird, or it doesn't stay at all. And so the more gentle I was, doing just a little bit at a time, the better. It does take forever, but it's 2 minutes and then 20 minutes of not doing anything. 2 minutes, 20 minutes of not doing anything. 2 tips for this. One, I did add a little bit of volume to it using Elmer's glue. Almost, if you imagine how hair gets colored, where you sort of hold it up with some paper and then cover just part of it. I sort of did that to get some volume because otherwise it was going to be a little flat. She has a lot of volume, but the cosplayers I saw that really tried to mimic that volume, I felt like it's too dangerous that you get into this helmet hair area, and I didn't want that. So I wanted a little bit of volume up, but not too much. So I used that to kind of keep it out. And then the other thing is, just know that you will not be able to make this shape and keep it on a table like a normal person. I had to do a lot of holding it sideways and propping it up with glasses and bowls and cans of spray paint and paper to keep the glue from sticking to anything. But it's just a matter of, you know, figure out the position that will hold the hair where you want it, then put the glue on, and then you'll be fine. And then you figure out a new position for the next piece of glue. But it ended up working great. I loved the look of it. I loved how it felt. And it was such a comfortable wig to wear because of that lace front. The last thing I'll mention is a note on modesty. For those of you who have seen the kind of costumes I make, you'll know that modesty is not necessarily my strong suit. But I did have a party that I wanted to go to where I wasn't totally sure who was going to be there, and specifically that there were going to be children there. And Aeon Flux's costume is sort of like a lot of butt right at child level. And I felt like that was a step too far. I'm okay with making adults uncomfortable, but it's not up to me to put that onto other people's children. So I took a bit of the jeggings fabric that I had left over, just made this simple rectangle, and with safety pins turned it into a wrap skirt. And it actually looked really good. It looked very intentional, like that's totally what that costume is supposed to look like. The other thing that was nice is that then when I went to the other party where I didn't have to worry about that, I could fold this up and actually unzip my shirt a little bit and just stick it right here and zip it back up. And because of the way the shirt sat on my chest, you didn't even notice it. So I was able to take my wrap skirt, put it away, and then it was gone. So that was a nice solution. I know that the modesty level of this costume is an issue for women who've tried to wear it out to cons or in public. You can tell in some of the pictures they had to cover up. And so I like the idea of having a cover up that still maintains the look of the costume and still looks good and would look good in pictures and everything, and be an intentional solution that you wanted rather than something that you just had to figure out on the fly. It is also nice in case you want to sit down at all, because it's a little weird to sit down with your bare butt on someone else's furniture. So that was my Aeon Flux costume. It was super fun. It was definitely a bit daring, which is something that I have always liked about my cosplay. And as usual, way more warm to wear than you think it's gonna be. It's actually very comfortable the whole night. The whole thing was pretty comfortable to wear, including, as I said, the wig. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and otherwise I will see you later. Bye!